I'd like to really start with, it's really the staff. I really want to thank the staff for their contribution to Green Mountain Alliance, the expertise that Jeremy, John, and Valdez and Ernst have brought to the table. Thank you. And I think I'd like a round of applause, if you don't mind, just really, none of them are a full-time job. They're more or less limited time. They're volunteering a lot of their time. They sort of live and breathe Green Button, especially Valdez. When I get on the call for 5 minutes, it's usually 20 minutes. So it's always a time, and Jeremy gets my calls a lot of time and picks up. So they're really the ones behind it and really helped us with everything from leadership, from the electron persuading teams, and being on standardization. So they're the brains behind the operation here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our vision is really to be the go-to place as we talk about where we are, in a sense of our mission is to really enhance the standard as we go through, ensure compliance, and looking at what we can do to demonstrate value and as we move forward. In a number of areas, security enhancements and build imaging features there. It's also from a number of certifications. We've done almost 147 certifications, which is quite a bit considering where we started off with the implementation, which means if a third, a utility or is certified for download and connect my data, that means any third party can register. They'll get the same thing everywhere they go. And likewise, there's download my data and connect my data in there as well. There's working groups and commissions and consumers, so it's a lot of participation, a lot of forums and regulations and things that happen as we go forward. It's all around, we're wrapping, you'll see a little bit of what we're calling directory services. So directory services to us will be the connecting customers to third parties to utilities. Where's the go-to place and where you will know, hey, I've done that, I want to roll it out, and this is across North America, sort of thing. And that's really the key piece that we've been working on, and we want to talk a little about that today to show you that piece. Green Button Board, and some of them are here today, really want to thank them for their contribution and efforts as we go forward with a number of people, like for Chris Irvin, there's definitely Department of Energy, and from NIST, Dave Willen, to mention a few, and Jonathan Booth, who are there from NASP, and then we've got utilities and others represented here as well that are looking at third parties there too. So there's been a collaboration, it's been a fairly good board in the sense of really looking at where we need expertise and coming in time to help us move forward. Members, just quickly, there's about 40 members, various utilities that are represented, and again, this was, we've got new additional players coming in on the service providers as well, and we're looking at those players as we come forward and develop solutions. And there's the affiliations we have with Bowman, we announced that, and others, and I mentioned NIST and Department of Energy earlier, and the Ontario Ministry as well in one of the examples that we've been really working together with affiliates and associations who's there. The Smart Energy Consumer Club had a session yesterday where some of the players talked to as well, and we want to continue those relationships. It's a flexible standard. Today we have, electricity, natural gas, and the version 4 will be coming with the PDF of the image and more security. And we're looking at tomorrow, we're looking at obviously carbon data for the carbon footprint, what the reduction will be, and we're looking at different sources as we go along. And it's also about a testing platform that's based on SB and other things as we look at moving forward and so forth. It's built on the top of other standards as we make sure that we're keep being open as possible as well. And there's third parties that are easily onboarded, and we need to really make it easier for us in the sense of onboarding is one of the things there. We'd really like to highlight a few of the number of large utilities who've got a number of applications there. There are quite a few that have been registered in their data access platforms. So these are things that have developed over time, and there's more as we see coming in. I've got this is a little slide I wanted to put in here because there's always talk about, so what did we get? What's the value of Green Button? And the way we need to measure it, not necessarily third parties, the number of downloads, while it's important, I think I want to focus in on what is the real thing that we're looking at is really to translate that into operational excellence. From a point of view of how do you promote more self-service? How do you let customers have more choice? How do you get them to be paperless? How do you get them to be sign up for outage maps? Underlying having a green button platform is actually promoting a lot more shared services and operational efficiency. So we need to look at those things from how do we do a better customer relationship and customer in the middle of this. And that's what Green Button does. Customer is the middle. And so this helps us from an end-to-end really look at how we run efficiently as a utility. There's another part of it is about affordability. It's the number one thing from customers and where we are. How do we actually manage consumption? How do we avoid a disconnect? So if we get data to the right place and do that, that's another outcome we get. So we have to track these things as we go forward. It's about economic development. It's the small businesses that can't afford big energy advisors or service providers all the time to have a solution that's like the big guys, so to speak. So we're looking at trying to break that thing and make an even playing field for munis to IOUs to whatever you have. How do you do that? That's what really we're talking about here, to help bring that forward and help businesses that need to create jobs. The other one is about the environmental stewardship. How do we promote more consumers? How do we look at how we have hydrogen heat pumps? How do we look at that? Because particularly water, gas, and electricity is all there together. So from a consumer point of view, it's all utilities that we're looking at and trying to look at these things. And looking ahead, we'll talk a little bit about that. This to me is really one of the three things that really are important. Anything you do, you need visibility. Visibility means that you know what it is at the enterprise, but you don't restrict yourself to the enterprise. You need to be able to compare with others. So if we have certain people on, let me give you an example, the rate plans, right? We all offer different rate plans. It'd be nice to know who signed up for one rate plan in our jurisdiction, and another one, for example, there's an ultra low rate for EV charging. Not just what is happening in our utility, but across 60 utilities in Ontario, for example. It'd be good to have that visibility for us in important, because then you compare and say, hey, how come somebody's taking advantage or something that's happening that we're looking for? Then the other part comes after you have visibility, is controllability. How do you control that demand? How do you have continuous demand response? How do you move forward with things that need to happen? And then that is really about predictability. So then you move to that stage and then you can say, hey, at this point we can look at from a secure standard. AI will require us to make sure that we have secure data, and Green Button can be there for not just yourself, you're going to be able to compare with other utilities. So, on that note, next I'd like to we do this every year. We recognize a few individuals for their contribution. So the first one is, we call it Chairman's Award, is to Con Edison for their contribution for the Green Button certification and integrated energy data, so resources, leadership that's been provided. And beyond Vinny Lou couldn't make it, so I think Leon's going to present them both. I think you're going to hear, he's going to go on a panel as well.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. And so the press, looking forward to hearing. Next is Itron for their leadership, and Luke Snyder. Again, I think you're.
Big smile, guys. Perfect.
Of course, these are Chairman's Awards, but we would be nothing without our leadership around here. So we figured as staff and others and other members of the Green Button Alliance that it was time that we recognized an additional group of folks that have put work into this for 10 years of our existence. And so without further ado, I want to honor London Hydro for their 10 years of Green Button innovative leadership. Zoran has been instrumental in his team. Bobby worked on the directory services and did a fantastic job. And of course, Syed is led as our chairman for a full 10 years of joy and punishment and pain and effort. And so thank you very much, London Hydro.
I don't think that was supposed to be on the agenda, by the way. There's only supposed to be chairman.
You get this heavy work.
All right. Thank you. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Couldn't have done it without you. All right, I want to take us one step a little bit further here. Originally, we had Chris Irwin from the smart grid sector of the DOE joining us today. However, all travel for Department of Energy that wasn't security, national security related, was canceled. I asked Chris, would you please take a moment and share with us over Zoom and do a little interview, because we're not sure that the internet connection was going to be very good, and we were right. It's terrible today. But Chris decided to join us, and I got a little bit here on this. We spoke for about 22 minutes, 23 minutes, and it was such a great conversation. What I did was I chopped this down, so you'll see a lot of quick cuts here just to get an idea of what he has to say. I'll put the larger one online. You'll get to see it on YouTube and on our website, but I want to start off by letting Chris tell you his thoughts from the DOE's perspective. Thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have you be able to speak to our crew in Dallas. Let's talk about what will enable green button standardization for utility data access for everyone.
I think an important part in what's going to drive, it's like sort of the utility data access for all, is this idea of how utilities think of themselves. As they think of themselves many times as energy companies, and their service is electricity. But I would say that a utility's service in this day and age is information and energy. And one provided without the other is only going to be a partial service, and the service quality will be reflected in that. So I think that acknowledgement that utilities are energy and information service providers will be a major turning point. We have Ontario with 56 utilities providing green button data to their customers. And they're fully green button certified for both methods of data sharing, the download my data as well as the connect my data. And then when we look at states and regions like DC that have mandated data access early on, but years ago, and still working to meet those data requirements, what will be the key drivers to get them to get to that point? It's great to see this continuing nexus of green button adoption in Ontario. We're in the 21st century as a society, but our data economy is still very much in a medieval times kind of concept. And so, those nexuses of information flowing more freely is a precursor to the data economy that I think is possible and necessary in our electric sector. The other key drivers have to do with the things that regulators get up and think about every day, which is affordability, transparency, fairness, and things like that. Is that all of those characteristics that regulators want to imbue their systems with, want to permission investments in, have to do with driving affordability. And affordability is better pursued through coordination with customers and keeping customers informed. And that's going to be the data access thing that moves us forward, I think. Is that going to be from a federal side more, you think, or from states taking those initiatives? I don't believe so. I think that certainly there is a role of government in terms of working on the science and the fundamental issues. And basic science is not just physics. It's things that are immature in the industry. What is a mature data economy and things like that? I think that we would be able to provide some guidance to folks, but these are state level issues. The people with the leverage in working with utilities and things like that are in the states, and their leadership is going to continue to be the primary force. And will the driver really be from utilities providing to their customers more so than the sort of the advocates telling the utilities, please share these data? Good point. No, I think that the advocates need to be present and need to say what they need. It's like you look at let's just say commercial real estate and commercial building owners, is that they are sophisticated data operators, in the way they operate their buildings, in the way they operate their businesses that happen within the buildings. And so when they see this blindness to their energy dimensions from the only entity that provides their energy, I think that's where you see some of this advocacy come in. And I think one of the things that we're trying to tackle on the research front, that's right in the green button wheelhouse, is that in many utility configurations of their metering and billing systems, is that buildings are invisible in those systems. And so it makes it difficult for commercial building owners to see the picture that they need in those systems. So that advocacy, that participation in regulatory environments is a powerful voice, I think. If that building isn't metered by a single meter, then it's not visible. And so aggregating meters presents risks to privacy and sensitivities that a utility legitimately has. And so as we have advocacy for whole building data visibility, we also need to be working on those solutions. Is what kind of privacy enhancing technologies can be employed so that you can have aggregations that have building relevant energy information that are impervious to disaggregation and looking back into those metered accounts. And so that's one of the things I've been working on the research front.
Fantastic. But what we're finding now is that folks are saying, well, this is great. Now we have access to our data. Tell us how we get more data, almost bill recreation.
The energy usage data that a customer has access to needs to have a describable relationship to the billing data, to the bills that the customers pay. If you have these snapshots in time, it has to add up to something else that the customer is measured on. And so interoperability with billing and the way that costs are assigned to the customer is a critical one. But I think that the customers are looking for really interoperability with other data streams that they own or that they can get from the energy sector or other energy sector partners. So it's like Green Button has new and more interesting neighbors that we need to build some bridges to, I think. But they need to correlate. They need to be interoperable and understandable with each other.
We're biased, of course, but by the same token, anytime you open the data, thank you, you got your green button. Anytime you open the data, you want to make sure that you have the you want to make sure that there's not too much of a difficulty in mapping these data across the different platforms. I want to jump right into how the DOE starts to look at this and see the big picture, not just customer data, but how that fits with the other things you were discussing, other projects that are going on, other needs.
This is the point where it's like the 10-year anniversary is a fantastic milestone, and everybody's worked hard, and we all looked so young when it started and all this kind of stuff. Why should we be more hopeful about the next 10 years than we have been about the first 10 years and things like that? And that's where sort of the big picture comes in, because I've been thinking about all of the data in the grid. And I've actually been working with some researchers at some of the national labs on trying to get a picture of how much data do we generate today? Every smart meter, every recloser, every solar panel, how much data does our entire system generate today that could be used for operational decision making? Not do we use it, could we use it? Does that data exist? And then how much data will we have in 10 years and in 20 years and things like that? The amount of data on the system that everybody could be using for decision making is going to be growing by a factor of 500 in the next 10 years and by a factor of 1,000 by 2040. So you think you're overwhelmed by data today? Ha ha ha. That's nothing compared to the data that will be available. It's like, again, you don't need to use it, but basically by 2040, we have forecasts of about 36 exabytes of data across every asset in the system will be generated annually by the electric system. It's enormous. But here's the point where why do green buttons fortunes rise as this goes forward, is that almost half of that data generated by the system will be customer owned data. Customers inverters, customers energy storage systems, customers electric vehicles, and things like that. All of the capabilities for observability, all of the capabilities for control are growing orders of magnitude faster at the edge of the grid than they do at the middle of the grid. So if we're growing by a factor of 1,000 moving forward, and half of that data is going to be customer owned data, that means that we need to build our bridges with customers now. So that's my motivation. That's my optimism for Green Button, because that data economy that will emerge will be a very different animal, and it requires a marketplace. It requires an exchange of data and a willingness to do so.
Fantastic. Any closing thoughts that you have for us as we embark upon this, as we finish this meeting that's going on in this room today, that you want to share with them?
One of my goals every time I go to DISTRIBUTECH, and I can't be there this year, but I'll be back the following year, is I walk the entire show floor and I see it's like what is being discussed, what is being offered, and things like that. And so I guess I'd in addition to celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Green Button Alliance and being positive about the role of customer access to data, is think about how it fits into the data economy that's being advertised on that show floor. Think about it. It's like every inverter, every solar panel, every advanced recloser out there. Look at these things as data appliances and tell me that you don't need a vibrant data space and data economy to make that equipment sit up and do what you want it to do.
Chris, I want to thank you for your insights today, for joining us for our 10-year anniversary, and for the US DOE's continued leadership and support of Green Button. Everyone, please join me in thanking Chris for being with us virtually today. He will be able to hear your appreciation in the recording. So please clap happily. Chris, thanks again for your time. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Chairman.
So as you can see, I had a great time interviewing Chris and reconnecting, and we'll leave all the personal anecdotes out and so forth. I rolled through a lot of it, but there's a lot more material, so I want to share it with you. He's got some great visions. I hope you had some good takeaways of some numbers you probably have not heard come out of the DOE yet. Those are first-time numbers you've heard there. So that's kind of exciting, and certainly a lot of the reassurance of the things we already know. We have a panel coming up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a couple of different things that are happening in the different provinces and states, and then we'll go right on into our first panel. All right, so first off, I want to, of course, I'm going to start up north to our friends in Canada and point out some of the great things that are happening up there. Right now in Ontario, they are moving forward with all sorts of different implementations, especially what we call onboarding, which is when a third-party company who's providing services to a customer interfaces with a utility to prove that their servers can communicate properly without inadvertent denial of service attacks, inadvertent causal issues. And so we just learned last week that Johnson, and we believe they're the first, who is onboarded with all 56 utilities that have Green Button up there in Ontario. So that is really exciting, and it's another proof that the certification program does work. We're talking about 56 different utilities with different vendors who provided their platforms, some of them who built their own platforms, and this small member company of ours has been able to pull it off and get all the 56 utilities as part of their programs that they can offer their customers. So we're very excited about that. This touches 5.3 million electric customers up there and 3.8 million gas customers. So it's very exciting. Not to be left alone, of course, Nova Scotia also has a mandate for Green Button and to be certified as well. Nova Scotia's implementation is going along swimmingly. They're providing both DMD and CMD to their customers, and that'll be certified solutions as well. So Nova Scotia Power is a member of us as well, and we're really thrilled to have them be involved in that. Jump down a little bit, we're going to head to New York and look at what's happening in New York. This is just a touch of what you're about to hear in the very first panel that we have up here. But this is a little bit of a look at some of the folks who are involved in that program. This is a unified database. Syed mentioned it before when we gave the award to Con Edison. This is a database of 9 different utilities that are involved in it. Con Edison and Orange and Rockland are they're a joint organization. They're owned by the same company, so they did their programs together. We have all sorts of different things that they're doing in this. One of our sponsor member companies, Utility API, provided the backhaul on this. It is now in phase 2, they call it, out of 3 different phases. Phase 2 should, we're hoping, end at the end of the year. And that'll open up the door for anybody in the state of New York to be able to obtain their Green Button data. So that will be a big thank you. There are a while out there, and it's a huge lift, and it's really going to make the buildings market pop. So that's really exciting. And you can now get onboarded and test on their sandbox to make sure that your tools and things are right if you're a third-party company. Moving into the place that started the mandate concept, we had mandates in California and Texas and other places in the country prior to Green Button even being launched as an organization, Green Button Alliance. But now we also have mandates that are coming from the government that are, this particular one was the very first one that was signed by the governor of New Hampshire. Sununu signed it into law and said we will have a unified database. New York saw that and they jumped to it. So New Hampshire has to catch up now on this. But Dunsky just released a report that can help you understand some of the use cases in New Hampshire alone and compare some of those things to what's happening in California and where the certified implementations will make a big difference. So certified mandates are what's driving the interoperability aspect. This is also trickling down into New Jersey, where they have just now gone to the point of sharing Green Button data as soon as they get their AMI rollouts completed here. So this was a long process. If anybody's from New Jersey, this has been going on for quite a long time, and they're finally getting to that point. We've also seen some interconnection of other states that want to get involved in things too. In fact, we have, with the New Hampshire process that's going on, they've decided that they're a pretty small company with really 3 IOUs that serve that area. So they figured, let's see if we can partner with some of these other states. So they're going to do a 4-state conglomerate. So we'll have New Hampshire in that, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine. So we're looking forward to the things that are going to come with that. And they're each going along setting up these proper things such as Bill of Rights for their residents and so forth. So this is really exciting. And then Massachusetts is also involved in that, I mentioned. So that's going to be exciting. That was just signed into law by their governor, and that'll move forward very, very soon. Just, I guess as soon as they get all the ducks in a row. Down in North Carolina, the partners have agreed that they are going to share data. They are going to use Green Button for doing this. And this is very exciting. This was a group effort of those who wanted everything under the sun and those who were afraid to try to get too deep into it. And now they've all come to the same table and agreed. So that's really exciting. And again, up in Rhode Island, we have a brand new docket that went through there, and they said that they will approve their AMI rollouts on the condition that Green Button and hand and grid edge plans are filed for that same thing. So we anticipate that this will roll out fairly quickly. They believe by 2026 that everything would be certified up in Rhode Island. Things are moving quick. I got a couple folks that are going to come up here and talk to you now on maximizing utility data. You're just going to hear about some of the same folks that you just heard from before, Leon and Devin and Luke. Right now, the reason this meeting is so important is because we have a whole bunch of utilities that are providing access and so forth. We need to talk about the power of the data itself, how it drives innovation, efficiencies, and sustainability. And so my first question will be, how important is it that utility data access and sharing platforms be standards-based? Let me start off with those who just went through that process. Leon, what is your feeling on that?
Sure. I could share a little bit about our standardization journey. We've had a version of Green Button Connect and Con Edison since 2018. And it was fairly successful. We have 44 participants registered, so you could update the slide up there. What we've heard from some of the participants is that, they want to participate in the New York market, but because we weren't fully standardized, it took them a little bit longer to integrate with us. So in 2023, we partnered with the Green Button Alliance and looked for those deviations from the standard, and by last year, the summer of last year, we did get certified for both Con Edison and Orange and Rockland utilities. So it's been too short for us to know exactly if that increased the rate of adoption, but what we have heard from participants is that for those that have integrated with other utilities that are Green Button Connect certified, it was a much quicker process for them because there's less customization involved for their interfaces. So I think it's very important, and we're seeing a lot more interest in our data, obviously. The latest being Columbia University, who just signed on as a partner.
That's great. I want to pull this over to Devin, and let me introduce Devin since she hasn't come onto the stage yet. Devin is the CEO of Utility API. Utility API is a sponsored member of our organization. We thank them for that. They have been with us for, gosh, I think almost since the inception as well, at least as a regular member, and then jumped into the sponsorship after being elected to the board several times and reaching their board election limits. And so it's been great to have them be a part of everything. Devin, let me ask you, because your company certifies an enormous number, and we certify, your company prepares quite a number of companies that are out there looking for certification. Are most of them coming to you looking for a sort of, is it because they're coming to you for mandates, or are they coming to you because they realize the value in the certification, or is it a combination?
I actually, so I'm here today because the person on our board seat, Josh Keeling, he's on spring break, so Josh is the diplomatic one. I am not. So, that's what's great about him. And so I really want to, make it clear that well, maybe it's like a hot take. Vendors are coming because there's value in this data. We all know that, right? They need this data to run their businesses, to provide services to their customers, often a shared customer with Con Ed, right? Or they are the customer, Columbia's example, right? And the headache that they have around trying to enroll in these programs is immense. It's the reason the hot take I came up with is, yes, they love standards. They crave standards. They want to know it's going to look the same no matter where they go. Otherwise, people will build businesses that just ignore the standards. And we unfortunately have seen that when it comes to the Green Button standard itself. There's a lot of utilities, you had an experience. You had a Green Button, right? But it wasn't a Green Button.
It was close.
It was close. It was the best one. You were showing data were the best ones that weren't Green Button. And when you have the challenge I've seen there though is they all call themselves Green Button. And so as a standards body, instead of rising to the level of standards as a certification as where people are seeing this wonderful standard and what it can do, they associate anything that says the name as a Green Button. And so I think as an organization, we need to do a better job of not only certifying wonderful platforms, but when people are claiming it's a Green Button, when it's not, we should also be addressing that in the market, because the market's confused, is my hot take. And we need to clear up the confusion as fast as possible for this standard to be able to ultimately reach its ultimate potential.
That's a really good point. That's a good point. Yeah, it's been a tough one to police for us coming at it from being given the standard after it was already baked. It was out there since 2011, and most of those early implementations thought they were meeting the standard, but there was no certification at the time, and so until the early download metadata certification and the late it was 2019 for Connect My Data, there was a lot of years in there where people were flying a little bit blind. So I totally agree with you.
Totally understand where the problem came from, right? No, that's the same, but we have the opportunity here to solve that. And that's what I think is that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, it is exciting. We're at that stage now. We've met that point where there's enough mandates to demonstrate that there's
Exactly right. The tipping point can be here,
yeah. Now, we're going to end up having a lot of data, a lot of different data, so much different data that we're going to need to find different use cases for those. Luke Scheidler from Itron, who just came up for the award that you'll see, and you're going to hear, by the way, from Devin and Luke right after this. They're going to give you some more deep dives. But I wanted to ask you, Luke, about these data that we're getting now. Can it be augmented? Can we add more to it? Can people get more value out of it, and what is the approach?
Yeah, you're going to hear me talk about the wealth of new data that are coming out of the new generation of smart meters. Chris mentioned it in the intro there. Orders of magnitude more data that the meters are creating, and that's because the new generation of meters aren't just meters anymore. They've got little computers in them, and they're running applications on the meter, one of which is a metering application, but there are a bunch of other applications as well that start to make different real-time data available and more granular data available. One example is applications running on the meter that are doing load disaggregation, particularly for large loads and distributed energy resources, EV, PV, battery and energy storage, and they can send real-time alerts and notifications over the AMI network that arrive within seconds or minutes, which starts to get us to the point where we can be doing operational type use cases. So you can know when an EV starts its charging cycle, when it stops its charging cycle, and those data can be delivered in near real time. Also, those meters have Wi-Fi connectivity now, so if you need to send a lot more data, if the application calls for it, you can actually stream real-time data up to a 1 second interval resolution delivered in real time. And when you start to have both more information on what's going behind the meter and get that information delivered in real time, you can start sending things that impact the operations of the grid in real time. Simple example would be a time of use notification. Hey, you're entering a time of use rate period. We've noticed your usage is above average. Try turning off or delaying X, Y, or Z device. And you can give a very specific recommendation to a customer that is going to save them money and help out the grid. Now, all of those data types, they're coming off the meter. They have to do what's going on in your home. They fall under the same category of data, right? It's personally identifiable information that requires customer consent. So all of these additional data types, they need to be brought into the same green button process. It's confusing enough for customers sometimes just with green button, but creating 3 separate processes is never going to work, right? All of that needs to be in one seamless experience for the customer. And connecting their meter to Wi-Fi, for that matter, too. If I've connected my meter to Wi-Fi, now what? Well, I'm going to share those data with X, Y, and Z parties that are going to provide me various valuable services in return.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so you're going to gather the data. You're going to do some Wi-Fi. You're going to do some other things. When you pool all these things together, and we talk about the IEDR that's coming, is there advantages to having central repository data, or is it sort of a single point of failure? Are we creating a Pandora's box, or are we creating something of value for the customers? Any three of you can answer, because all three of you are dealing with this at this time.
Is IEDR Pandora's box?
I do want to caution that, and this is something I flagged from Chris's talk, that to make all of this data relevant to the customer, it has to be integrated. And not all data is created equal. Some real-time data may, as it being processed, change. So what's most relevant to the consumer, to the ratepayer, is their electric price. And if that is not correlated with their real-time energy uses due to whatever process, that's going to stand out and affect the customers. So when we are seeing this in New York City, we have a lot of local laws. Local Law 97 just came out, and that's requiring benchmarking of large buildings to measure their energy consumption. And what's unique about this law is that it now imposes penalties on property owners that exceed the estimated thresholds for greenhouse gas emissions. So if the data being used for that use case deviates from the data for billing or for other use cases due to the nature of the processing, it's going to have a real impact on the customers. And and again, I guess getting back to the question, that the standardization and integration of all these data sets into a common repository is one way to solve for that, to have those standards, certifications, and ensure that the utilities, the IDR is a statewide initiative, that we're doing these things consistently. There's one idea to you get the requirements, you implement the system, but actually forcing that integration into one platform is what ensures that the implementation is consistent.
I'll second that from the integration and aggregation standpoint, and I think states really need to learn from each other here. Like IEDR has that centralized repository where things can be aggregated, analyzed together, both grid and customer data. At least in the New Hampshire RFI that was released, they were very specific that there wasn't going to be any central housing of the data, at least for an extended period of time. It was all going to stay with the utilities and would be called via APIs when needed. That's a real challenge if you want to start expanding to additional use cases beyond what Green Button is doing today, more or less, to the intent and purpose of IEDR, which is to really create more value by integrating.
Devin, you're building it. So
yeah, we're building it. Yeah.
I
I think what's being raised here is actually a really fundamental. I'm not going to say challenge or opportunity, depending on how you look at it. So IDR in New Hampshire were really thought about around the same time. IDR went first. But the idea that was being debated was, is it going to be a central repository or is it going to be an API and APIs? So the two things you all are talking about here, right? And the challenges that you're raising are the same challenges that both groups have looked at. And New York decided to go with the central repository as a way to kind of compel this maybe solve the extensibility problem in the future, because New York started with a use case, if I remember correctly, based system. Like, what are the use cases that we want to go first? And let's make sure we can provide a platform that we can solve those. And then what are the ones that are going to come next? And can those be integrated? New Hampshire has been a different scoping of, we need to make this available for the market. And what's the lightest, simplest way to make this move faster? It was like, oh, well, if the utilities are already going to do some of this work, we can just extend that, right? And so your fundamental question, though, is it's a smart idea. And I think I agree with the rest of the guys that on the panel here that we work in a market where the utilities have traditionally, you can tell me I'm thinking about this wrong, have served their market that was only within their walls. But the community of businesses that are providing services to those same customers are no longer within those walls. They are national companies by nature. And so they are looking for these standards and the interoperable challenges to be solved so that they can stamp out solutions to consumers at a price point that consumers can find. And their marginal costs for a lot of these vendors come into this data integration challenge, right? And so we can make that much more simple to them by centralizing, by bringing it into one place, or finding solutions that can do that for them. They will gravitate towards those. And ultimately, we're trying to solve the problem of innovation and providing an energy market that works for all. And yes, centralizing and building standards-driven services across utilities is the key.
Okay, so now you're pulling in all these data into these central repositories. People are now getting to these data. They need to be able to utilize these data to do different things. What are some of the use cases, Luke, that you see? Because you're also talking about disaggregation of appliances and other types of things. You're talking about doing a lot at the meter in terms of getting these efficiencies and value out of all of it's liberating that data as the panel title is about. So what do you see as the solution in that regard?
Yeah, again, I think we're getting into the concept of real-time data and the difference between getting data 24 or 48 hours behind through a green button mechanism after it's gone through the BDE process and it's the billing quality data versus getting data feeds in real time that you can do operational things that help the grid right now. And I think that's a real step change in value. The most expensive things that utilities do are at the margin. You know, those additional loads that come on that make you turn on that peaker plant, or that additional EV that plugs in that blows up a service transformer. And so the meters in another app that they're running is transformer connectivity modeling and active transformer load management. So the meters can self-identify, they know which transformer they're connected to, and then all the meters chatter to each other and aggregate up their load to that transformer level in real time. So it's like having a virtual meter on that transformer. You can monitor the rated capacity. You can also know the service panel information from the customer and monitor the total capacity going through that service panel. And you can use that Wi-Fi connectivity on the meter to communicate directly with behind-the-meter devices like EV chargers. And so if the customer wants to install a level 2 charger, but they only have a 100-amp service panel, the meter can actually monitor the total loads on the service panel and transformer and tell that EV charger in real time, okay, you know, ease back, throttle down, or delay your charging so that we don't blow up your service transformer or your service panel. And I think, you know, that is a step change in the type of value that you're creating for customers, because they don't have to spend $5,000 on a service panel upgrade, but also for the grid. And if we're using customer devices on an operational basis from day to day, rather than just a couple times a year for critical peak capacity events, it really changes the way we can incentivize those customers. Their asset is worth a lot more to the utility, so we can rethink incentive design at a much higher level, which should, you know, get more people into programs. A lot more money will go a long ways toward getting people more excited about joining these programs.
Okay, so we talked about what's happening in New York. I mentioned a slide of a lot of different things that are happening in the different states. Do any of you know of any additional things that are happening with mandates for utilities? And do you see any adoptions in groups like community choice aggregators and clean energy companies and things like that? I think the first, I'll throw that to Devin, because I know his company has been working in that field as well.
Yeah, I mean, you listed a bunch of the mandates here, so maybe it's not a totally inclusive list, but it's, you know, kind of what you're talking about is making it easier for people to sign up, right? And so community choice aggregators, right, for y'all that don't know what they are, they kind of sit between the utility and they're the cities that they serve. And so, for example, one of our customers, Peninsula Clean Energy, by name, it's south of San Francisco and the Bay, and it serves customers on the peninsula. And what they are is basically a retailer for the cities. So they've sit under PG&E, and they serve by selling energy to their customers. They're trying to figure out how they can really have a local, address local pain points. So they have a lot of large commercial customers in Silicon Valley, for example. Most of them are within their territory. They also have a motivated customer base that wants to buy clean energy products, whatever that may be, solar panels or heat pumps or EVs or batteries or the combination of all those. And they're looking for the path for them to be able to get the data they need to actually procure these services at the home level, at the small business level, or at the large companies I talked about. And the same, when they looked at us for providing their green button system, it's like, well, the same platform that can be used for the largest companies that want to have access to their own data in a streaming manner, that the CCA can serve, can also enable the homeowner to be able to share data with a vendor to be able to get the services they want, so they can have a much more clean energy performing home. All of those go together in creating a very motivated customer or an implementer in the CCA, right? And so I think the difference, what we're talking about, what it ultimately boils down to though, is there are the states that are heavily, the IOUs are being mandated to do this because the states see this opportunity. But in places where there's no regulatory pressure, there are utilities that just understand that this is the path that they want to move to serve their customers better. It's like, how do I enable my customers to be able to share their data with the vendors that they want to work with when it comes to their energy services? A lot of the times it was originally around how can I provide them with opportunities to get cleaner energy. That clean energy conversation was great. That was also how do I get more affordable energy. Customers are looking at these solutions now because it's cheaper to put in potentially a battery and some solar panels over the long run. If I'm going to own my house for 10 to 15 years, my energy bill is going to go down if I do this versus just buying from the CCA or from PG&E, especially as California, for example, the rates are going up pretty aggressively. And so for me, the exciting part is the standard itself is not only serviced by mandates, states and regulatory bodies that see the potential here, but there are utilities that just understand that this is the path to the future. I heard Chris Irwin talk about it's not just electricity delivery, it's also information delivery. Is enabling utilities to be that information delivery company as well, is where we're seeing a lot of growth for our own business.
That's Leon, because you're there in the heart.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so one of the things we're noticing in our participants for Green Button Connect enrollments, it's a lot of demand response aggregators. And just as an example of how motivated the customers are that sign up through these aggregators, we did a study last year to see how much capacity is there in that market. And for those that signed up through Green Button Connect, there's about 300 megawatts of capacity that was pledged. There was 287 megawatts to be exact. But as an example of how motivated they actually are, we saw a realized capacity of 97% of that committed last year. So these customers are definitely interested in participating, whether it's through incentives that the demand response aggregators are providing, or their own choice to help them create the environment.
Is it mostly commercial or residential?
It's a mix.
It is, okay. And multi-tenant, I assume?
Yeah. We're seeing a huge growth in just pure residential. I mean, it's a bigger market, obviously, so that makes sense, right? But their load shift is less, obviously, per event. But it's just where our market is rapidly transforming, right? Load flexibility is the path to the future, right? We can either build more gas meter plants, or we can find the capacity that's already available, as you mentioned. And people in their homes given the opportunity to participate. If we make it easy for them to sign up, but maybe the data easier, people are they're eager for this.
Yeah.
Like it's like time for us to help them and get out of the way.
It's mostly residential on the Itron focus, right? But in terms of aggregate large collections of residential.
Currently, yes, mostly residential.
And you're seeing that the acceptance for that is high?
Yep.
Okay. That's a good sign. That's a good thing. I mean, I think people aren't fearing what they used to fear so much, and I think maybe AI is a big part of that. In our next panel, we're going to learn a little bit about some AI things as well. I want to close out this panel. I want to thank you all, especially the fact that you are all in some capacity either sponsors or serving on the board as members, and or both. And it's really wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much, Luke Scheidler from Itron, Devin Hampton, Utility API, Leon Buckman from Con Edison. Thank you all for joining us. Devin, stay here. We're going to get Bob mic'd up, but you can start up front and get rolling and telling us a little bit about what you want to talk about.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Leon.
So we've already really talked about in our discussion here, like what's next, right? Like I think GBA, we understand data access. I think anyone in this room doubts that this data is valuable for the market. But it's where are we going when it comes to making so quickly by utilities, we're pretty unique in this market in that we sit in the middle. So not only do we build data sharing platforms certified for utilities, but we also work with over 1,600 different vendors in the market that need access to this data. And we sit squarely in the middle as building, we see ourselves as a data infrastructure company. Our job is to enable, no matter who you are, whether you're a utility or you're a vendor looking for data, the opportunity to be able to move that securely and with customer consent. Because ultimately, our job is to make sure that all consumers have access to the ability to share their data with whoever they want, whenever they want to get whatever service they need. We've already talked about this a bit, but these are all customers of ours, and not all of our customers, just representative customers. Obviously, as I said, they're on both sides of the coin. Initially, I love seeing Chris Irwin on here. We got our start with government grants, Department of Energy. We thought that this market would be a thing before there was a market. Jeremy already hinted to that. We were here before 10 years ago. And DOE saw it as well, and actually both sides of our business that I just don't subscribe, DOE gave us a grant to kick off both of those. And so we're really happy to be able to be a poster child for government support of innovative technologies in action. We serve some of the biggest utilities in the space and some of the biggest implementers as well. As I've already mentioned, some of the other things, we're SOC 2 compliant, very important working with utilities. We take security and privacy very seriously. We also work with a lot of innovative companies on the outside. One of our things that we like being able to do is, yeah, you saw Sunrun and some of the big companies, but we also work with the long tail. Some of the smallest companies that just need data, whether they're a roofing company putting solar or a heat pump company, they need data to provide a customer a quote. They use our platform as well. And I like to highlight that the same platform that National Grid Utilities is using is the same platform that Bob's Roofing and Solar is using over in Arizona. A few quick lessons, because I know I have a few minutes. You all know this, but we want to make sure people understand protecting privacy does not make it, makes it harder to use. That's a false choice. New use cases should be new to cost. We've already talked about it. This is extensible type of software. We talked about the growing need to consolidate. What else? This is operational infrastructure at this point. We were talking about it a bit. This market has been a thing we've been talking about wanting to make happen. You've seen the mandates. You've seen what service providers are doing out there in the field. This is a market that is, time is now, and it's up to us to fully unleash and unlock the potential. And green button and recertification is a huge piece of that. We talked about IADR basically already. All the utilities in New York, one platform, utility APIs, building it. The goal is to get rid of all the hurdles we've already talked about. I don't need to spend much time on this slide, beyond the fact that it is the first of its kind, and we're really happy to be a part of that team to enable this to be built into the market. We've already talked about other states are looking at this closely and looking at what it can mean to not only do it per state, but even maybe regionally. And we really fully support that direction. Consolidation, interoperability, places so that businesses, no matter where they're working, know how to get this data and serve their customers is important for us. It also lowers costs massively. Our goal is to make this data access problem a very, very, very cost-effective solution so that vendors aren't held back when they're trying to get this data to their customers. But we gotta get more modern. So like we're using this PG&E example. This is something that Apple has on their phone now around data sharing. If you live in PG&E, notice there are 4 screens on here. These are 4 button clicks you gotta do. If you look at the native Share My Data platform, PG&E, I believe at one point it was 17 clicks, maybe it's shorter now, where a customer can actually consent to moving their data, right? Most of our platforms are, I think, about 4 or 5 clicks as well. Who are you? Prove that you have a right to authorize this data, put a text code in, hit share, you're done, right? We see a massive drop off in customers consenting to data sharing because there are too many screens for them to click through. The numbers are pretty stark. And so as an industry, we need to find ways to make this a much more efficient system for the user, right? We talk a lot about making it easier for the utilities. We talk a lot about making it easier for the vendor, but we need to make it easier for the customer, the consumer themselves. So this is an example for sharing data. We also have a prototype about VPP enrollment. Again, we talked about, I don't know, Con Ed, what you're using right now, but we are proposing platforms and working with service providers to, again, make that a massive, most a 5-step process. Again, where the interface meets the customer is important. Is actually probably key. If we don't solve this part, there's no point in solving the rest because people aren't going to use the systems. And then we talked about statewide tools, but also more data. Again, belaboring a point, I'm glad we actually had the last panel. This is California and how California is thinking about offering their own statewide tool. If you notice, a lot of this data isn't customer usage data, it is customer rate data. We have all seen the challenge when a vendor is trying to provide a service to a customer and they don't know what rate they're on. If you don't know what rate someone's on and you change their energy behavior, you may actually end up costing them more money. So California is trying to solve that by coming up with a statewide rate tool that is based on customer consent because it is customer-specific rates that they can show the platform. This is another example of those other data fields that the green button standard could help enable to be able to provide full package services. So I'll just wrap up. We've already talked about one source of truth, the ability for customers to potentially be working with other vendors beyond the utility when it comes to their energy services, their energy, who they're paying essentially. Streamlining interconnection is always a thing. It needs to be solved rapidly. Like there's sign-up challenges and there's interconnection challenges. Always making sure that people, we're all used to using our phones for banking, for healthcare, for everything else. You know you have 360 data protection on that. Energy data should be no different. Most people are used to working with one cloud provider. They don't realize that. But you're saying yes to all these things. You are basically enabling all your data to be stored securely by trusted resources. Typically, it's not your utility or your energy vendor. It's going to be one of the big tech companies. And last but not least, the data is not always just the flow online. We're already seeing it. We already heard Itron talking about it. Other devices are recording data on customers, and customers need a secure, consent-driven way to be able to share that data. So, I appreciate the quick 5 minutes. Contact information is on the screen. Always happy to chat about where this industry is going, and to obviously, for us, find other partners who want to work with us in this future. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. We now have Bob Champagne from BHC Global. BHC Global is a sponsor of our organization. We thank them for that, and Bob has served on the board now for quite a bit and brought BHC to us, so we're doubly thankful to Bob.
Thank you, Jeremy. Most of you know me from my work in the AMI and low disag space for the last 10 years. I've got a different hat on today. Last November, I joined BHC Global to head their Center for Digital Innovation. Part of that is helping utilities identify and accelerate more use cases for their technologies that they have and new emerging technologies. This morning, the point that was made was 1,000 times increase in the data, 50% of it owned by customers, and we need a bridge, right? From our standpoint, Green Button platform over the last 10 years has been a great enabler for that bridge, but we also think the bridge today, some of that bridge is aged and maybe is even broken, right? And so I'm going to skip around a little bit in the slides just in the interest of time, but here's some realities. If you go to a utility website today, any website, and you say, how do I share my usage data? Or I want to share my usage data with a third party. These are real examples from a customer standpoint. In one case, you get a dead link. In one case, a company that actually has a Green Button platform, when you ask that question straight on the website, that the answer to that question is how to avoid your pipes from freezing. Okay? And in the third case, you get a very laborious response with what looks like a policy manual, right? Even some of the more established Green Button platforms, it's still painful to understand what I need to do next unless you know exactly where to go, right? And so I just tell you a little story about a company that, the founder of a company we just acquired a few months back called Power Connect AI, and you can visit our booth. We're at the Net to Grid booth showcasing some of this week. But the founder had just bought a Tesla, brought it home, and was thinking, okay, does my utility offer a rate plan for me? And spent 90 minutes on the phone trying, whereas the agent tried to kind of navigate the organization, all the available information for her to find out if there was in fact a rate plan. His vision was, can we provide a single point response to a customer for any problem that customer has? So he went into a client and he said, look, let me apply Gen AI, not too different than what all of us are experiencing with ChatGPT, right? Can we take that and simply upload the documents, upload the website, and literally have a customer come in and say, hey, how do I sign up for a new rate for my EV? And literally have it respond instantaneously. And if we can do that, then we should be able to move toward what's now called, some of you may be familiar with the term agentic AI, where we're beginning to bring data into the mix to inform the conversation, and then ultimately on the back end, automate that experience. I'm going to share two things with you kind of to close it a little bit, is I want to share with you what that experience looks like, and then I'll talk about what we're doing with Greenbutton.
Hey Vera, this is Mark Brazil. If I give you my account number, can you check why my bill is so high?
Hello, Mark. I'd be happy to assist you with your billing inquiry. Please provide your 10-digit account number, and I'll check the details for you.
261-865-8960.
Kindly allow me a moment to verify the account details. I have successfully retrieved your account information. How may I assist you further?
Why is my bill so high?
It looks like your current bill is about $1,203.61, which is significantly higher than last month. We did have much higher temperatures last month that may explain some of this. Would you like me to analyze your meter usage data for you and check for ways to lower your bill?
Sure. Can you also analyze my bill?
Our analysis of your usage relative to similar homes in the area indicates that your high usage might be caused by issues with your heating and cooling system. Would you like me to send you a link with some immediate steps you can take to lower your heating and cooling costs?
Yes, please send me the usage link.
I just sent that link to your number on file. Additionally, I noticed that you are not enrolled in budget billing, which helps keep your monthly payments stable. I can send you details in a registration link, or I can enroll you now if you'd like.
Yes, please register me to budget billing.
Okay, you are now registered for budget billing. You'll receive a text confirmation shortly with a link if you ever want to unsubscribe or change preferences. Based on your payment history, I can also offer you a one-time 30-day extension on your bill due date. Would you like to use that now or save it for later?
Save it for later.
Got it. I've saved the 30-day extension for later use. Is there anything else I can assist you with today?
Nope, we are good.
We really appreciate you being one of our most valued customers. Have a great day.
Thank you.
So 5 transactions, 5 interactions, about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And if you compare that with what that would have taken with a normal rep on a phone to go through the same kind of interactions, we would probably be into that 10, 15 minute phone call. So what does this mean for Greenbutton? Imagine this journey. My bill's way too high. Our analysis of your usage data shows high AC load, that your AC is working overtime. Same part of the journey we talked about before. Looks like you might want a troubleshooter. Customer says, my HVAC contractor told me to start thinking about replacement. Do you have any rebates you offer? Sure, we have a rebate up to 10% that many of our HVAC vendors are registered in. Do you have a preference? Yeah, I like ACE HVAC service. Great. ACE is part of our approved vendor list and can submit the rebate application for you. To provide a quote and pre-qualify you for the rebate, ACE requires 12 months of your usage data. Would you like me to authorize that now for you? Right? Wow, that was easy. Of course, that process, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. We're working with Utility API on a partnership that's going to bring those use cases and a bunch of others to life. We've got a use case we're working on around contractor recommendations to make a quote request similar to that. We've got C&I customer share billing data with a third party, and we've got C&I customer revoking their data sharing with a third party. All of those use cases are designed to be accomplished with the Gen AI application, but also some of the more automated experiences. That you just saw with the conversational AI. So that's it from me. Please come by the Net2Grid booth if you want to see some of this in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right, we're going to talk about standardized energy data, which is what we do, it's what we are, accelerating demand response and virtual power plants to advance a resilient and sustainable grid. We're going to hear from Alex Safran. He's with Logical Buildings. They're based out of New York, New Jersey area, and they serve the whole nation. Of course, Alex is a local in this region, so that's, what's that? A new local in this region, so you might still hear a little New York in him. And Will Baker from A New Home, and for those who are familiar with A New Home, I'm sure Will give you some scoop on it, but A New Home is a combined new entity that is some Google Nest action and some Home Connect. For those familiar with the industry, Home Connect is a California-based organization, and they are also nationwide. So first, this one will be for Alex. So Alex, can you introduce us to Logical Buildings? Tell us a little bit about the Grid Rewards program that serves, that you started in New York and moved elsewhere as well, and the customer types that are involved in that.
Sure.
Residential buildings, all of those different markets that serve.
Sure. Jeremy, thanks for having us. Thank you to the whole GBA team, of course. You know, ultimately, curiosity is a very powerful driver of the human experience. And it's interesting because we're probably at this point in the energy history where people are thinking about the energy they use and the costs they incur more than ever. And you know, places like New York are really interesting because you have a culture and a climate where people are actually interested in this both for financial reasons, for sustainability reasons, and for other reasons. And people want to make use of this data. They want to ask questions, but sometimes they don't know how to even formulate the question that they want to ask about the energy that they have. So the whole point of Logical Buildings is to unlock energy usage for everyone. Whether you live in a condo, a high-rise building, whether you are technically considered, you might be a low-income customer and you need ways to access affordable, reliable energy. We unlock this energy information for everyone. We train buildings. We teach people how to use this information because it's not enough to just dump data on them and say good luck. We need to inspire that curiosity in them, and of course, we want to reward them for it. So Grid Rewards is one of our programs specifically for residents and renters in New York and across the country, where without any hardware, without any sort of financial risk, residents, tenants can participate in demand response programs and earn revenue for it. And we want to make it as much of a no-brainer as possible, and we want to see everyone who has that curiosity participate in that program.
Excellent, thank you. And of course, Will, we want to hear a little bit more about Renew Home. I gave it the back of the sugar bag, or whatever you want to call it. But we want to hear about that and the new residential VPP program that you have running, and how you're leveraging those smart thermostats.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you very much, Jeremy and GBA, for having us here. Excited. There's a lot going on this week. We have a lot of people in town announcing our Renew Home VPP, and so come check us out. We'll have some conversations and go a little bit more in depth. But as of this week, we are a year old, and we're focused on building the most customer-centric energy management platform to meet today's needs. And I think we're all sort of familiar with the call to action here in that there's unprecedented load growth being driven by more renewable and decarbonization goals, electrification efforts, and just like the general intensity of energy intensity of the digital economy. We just heard from Bob about AI helping with that effort there. And so those sorts of efforts are increasing attention on the load right now. So what's required isn't just more capacity, but it's actually more dispatchable capacity capable of meeting the needs of the modern grid. And so VPPs are a great fit there. And I think we all saw the DOE VPP liftoff report, which was sort of their commercialization effort that came out at the end of 2023. At the time, they said that they were going to need, the grid was going to need 80 to 160 gigawatts of additional VPP capacity by 2030 in order to meet what at the time was forecasted an additional 200 gigawatts of capacity. And I think, not even a year and a half later, that report is dated. And so we're going to really need a lot of VPP capacity to be able to assist with that. And that's where we come in. So we have millions of households currently participating in our platform to manage energy and to shift load. And so on top of that, we're building an at-scale virtual power plant to make a big impact on grid reliability and sustainability. And so I think the general thesis is that when we focus on customer savings, comfort, and control, VPP participation skyrockets. And ultimately, that's a good grid resource. And so that's what we're doing. That's what we're out here to promote. When it comes to smart thermostats, I think that is only the beginning of the journey of a VPP. I think there's a lot of other connected load, batteries via the grid. There's a lot of things that need to be orchestrated together there. But it is such a sleeping giant today in that we forecast across the country there's about 70 gigawatts of latent HVAC capacity that could be tapped into via smart thermostats. And so let's start there. Let's go after some of these really big, impactful numbers as we add on, as we sort of diversify in the resources that we're able to bring in.
And does Renew Home intend to get into those pieces of it as well, beyond the thermostats?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a loading order for all of that. Clearly we are focused sort of where we came from our genesis, between Google and Home Connect. First initially on the Nest fleet, and then this year adding on new additional resources from other smart thermostat manufacturers.
That's great. I want to step back again to the Grid Rewards program. I want to know a little bit more about it and a little bit more about how when local laws, with the local laws that are in New York that are in place, there's a lot of incentive using the Grid Rewards to scale back. How do people to do that, and are they meeting the goals of the utilities in that process?
So I know some folks might be familiar with New York, or actually, obviously, the Con Edison team is coming from New York, but there's an interesting atmosphere in the city right now for owners, managers of buildings, anyone who has a physical footprint. So you've got Local 97, which Leon alluded to a little bit earlier, and a lot of people are scared. And they're scared because it's not necessarily just about the energy data, but because there's real teeth behind it. There's financial mechanisms that say, if you don't use your less carbon than is allowed for your space type, you're going to get fined. And it's not like it's a one-and-done situation. The emission limits intensify every 5 years. So most buildings in New York are feeling, okay, you know what, maybe I'm not facing financial penalties right now. That's going to change over the next 5 years. And the proactive buildings are thinking about, okay, what can I do now to start making these changes and investing in carbon reduction measures? The interesting challenge that multifamily owners and managers have is something called the split incentive. So imagine you own a beautiful high-rise, let's pretend we're in Billionaires Row, 57th, Manhattan, stunning building, and you can make lots of changes to your common areas. Maybe you're putting a new HVAC, a new boiler, you're doing all the right things. What are your tenants going to do? Now, sometimes the tenants might have their own initiative to use less energy, to do the right thing, but that doesn't always work. So you've got these building owners and managers that are really stuck because carbon usage in buildings is accounting for over 50% of energy. So what are they supposed to do? Grid Rewards is really an incentive alignment tool. And we're saying to people, listen, here's a way for you to get paid money by using less energy in a risk-free way. And it's interesting, one of the questions I always had was, does this actually create a change in long-term behavior, or are people really just doing this for the money? Now, I'm sure, being a realist, some people are just doing it for the money, and that's okay because it has secondary benefits. But we actually had a study done by a DOE laboratory that examined Grid Rewards users, again, this no-cost program for anyone to participate in a few different areas of New York, both for low-income housing and for a more affluent area. And the results were super interesting. Number one, both demographics reduced their carbon usage by 30%, and individuals in both of those types of buildings earn the same amount. If that's not energy equity, I don't know what it is. So the brilliance of just having a financial mechanism not only is a win-win for the residents, but we want Grid Rewards to just give building owners a way to say, oh, finally, here's a way that I can actually get my residents, and in some cases commercial tenants, to help me use less energy. Otherwise, by the way, if they don't reduce their fines, guess who's going to be stuck paying the check for that?
So both of you are in the business of connecting with these utilities and getting the data, and all of that's wonderful. The big question that I have then is, because you have to interface with the utility, they have to tell you what they need at a given moment in time. Right? Hey, you need to help us reduce this to a sustainable, a doable level so we don't have blackouts and brownouts. How do you get more utilities involved in this whole process of ensuring that we have the DRs and the VPPs to make it happen? What's the method behind that? I mean, maybe don't give away your secret sauce, but as we have two competitors here on the stage, as well as people who are working kind of in tandem for the same goal of the industry, but what do we do maybe as an alliance and as a community to get those utilities involved?
I think first off, I think utilities are looking for solutions right now. They are seeing problems up and down the stack, and just the ability to maybe not move as quickly in the traditional ways that they had before. And so I think they look for VPPs to be a part of that solution. It's not going to solve everything, but there's huge potential out there. And you can think of it as like steel already in the ground, right? It's been deployed, it's out there. How do we activate it and put it to use? I think Con Ed's a fantastic example of different value streams that are there for the consumer. One is like there's a specific contemplation for how distribution peak relief plays into the capacity markets at NYSO, and so you can have the same customer resource that is doing one thing one day, and that's making sure that there's increased resiliency on a particularly stressed local day, but then it's providing capacity to the rest of the state on a different day. And so I really think that this is one of those things where we are all trying to find solutions together and tap into what's out there. In terms of data, I think it is about asking early how that is going to be combined, like how those different value streams are going to be braided together, and so that we're not sort of fully down the path of, okay, this is a great new distribution program in Ohio, and all of a sudden we'd like to sell into PJM, but we don't know how to do that. And so starting really from the beginning and saying, like, what are those value stacks here, and who owns what are the property rights assigned to the different things, allows for us and utilities and stakeholders to be collaborators and try to figure out a solution.
You said collaborators. How do we partner? How do we get additional partnerships? Obviously, the Google Nest is one inroad into the home to be able to help provide these services. And I think Logical Buildings works with contractors on sub-metering and other types of things. How do we get more partnerships involved in this process and excite them to want to work with the teams and work with the data that's available across that market? And then after that, I'm going to go down and ask a couple of folks if they have some questions, and that way put you on the hot spot. Go ahead.
First, if I may, I just want to say also, I would say this, Leon, don't worry, even if Con Edison wasn't in the room, but Con Edison is an amazing, amazing partner. I think many utilities need to follow their example. Direct marketing, target segments, direct stakeholder engagement, reaching out to aggregators like us, making it easy and transparent. I think earlier we heard that it needs to be simple. This process, I won't call this a hot take, but I think it's fair to say many of our customers aren't thinking about energy all the time. They're thinking about what's going on at work, thinking about their kids, their soccer game, maybe they're thinking about the tomahawk steak they're going to make for dinner, who knows? Energy isn't on their mind all the time. So when you find ways to work in the background and put it forward to them in an easy, friction-free way, that's what we want to do. And I think in many ways, utilities need to follow that example of stepping back. There's a quote about humility, which is that humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. So if we just take ourselves out of the equation and say, okay, we know customers aren't really waking up thinking about, hey, I'm going to earn money today from demand response. Some are. Again, there are the super users out there. There are those who are really influential, but we have to remember that the majority of the population in America that should benefit and deserves to benefit from this doesn't even necessarily know about this. So in terms of partnerships, of course there are great relationships with utilities, retail energy providers, IoT companies, ones that are integrated with property management, or if you're thinking about multifamily high-rises. But also, if we go another layer deeper, what about architects, engineers? When you're constructing a building, who's talking to the owners, the developers, the homeowners from the beginning? Think about the touch points that we in our daily lives have with energy in our homes. What if an HVAC contractor came in? What if I was getting a new air conditioning and someone said, "Hey, by the way, this is a new, high quality device that, with the right thermostat, can participate in a great program to earn you money." What a great entry point that is untapped. So I think it's about finding new partners to get involved in this conversation, and then just giving people the opportunity to ask these questions that they don't necessarily even know that they have.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's going to take new types of partnerships that we haven't seen before. And so by way of background, we have a large strategic partnership with NRG that we announced in the fall. And so we have somewhere around 5 million households participating in our energy management system, 3 gigawatts of load under control right now. We participate in 100 plus utility programs with about 1.5 million people in those programs. And then in 2023, 2024, we shifted about 2.5 billion different energy shifts over millions of devices. So this is at scale now, and it's figuring out how do we go out and strengthen those partnerships. So what's interesting about the NRG partnership in Texas is that we're focused on co-investing together to build a 1 gigawatt VPP by 2030, and that's really a co-investment by both the utility and ourselves to build this from the ground up. And so that's something. And then elsewhere, when you're outside of ERCOT, you're dealing with more regulated utilities. It's going with the utility, sort of hand in glove to the regulator and saying, hey, we need a new paradigm for either distribution relief, or we need a new paradigm for peak shaving, or whatever you're trying to do, and say, like, here's why we think it'll benefit customers, it'll benefit all the ratepayers, and then the specific participants at the same time, and try to create something novel. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's really great. Questions from the audience. We got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get all the questions answered that you might have. I got the microphone, so.
Okay, thank you. So my question is not just for you two, but maybe for Luke and Leon too, to chime in. And it's basically, how are you thinking about the prosumer and FERC 2222 and Green Button Alliance, so this crossroad of this future of all this data that you want to make available, with the concept that in the future there's this idea that you could actually sell your energy to your neighbor, theoretically speaking, to FERC 2222. So anyways, just love to hear your thoughts on how you're looking at the future with Green Button Alliance, movement of data. I mean, VPPs play a role in some capacity in all this now. Just your thoughts on that would be great.
I have maybe 30 seconds on it. I'll pass it to Alex and Devin
Yeah, go for
that
it.
one. But I think it was super interesting what Chris from DOE said earlier, that there's going to be 1,000 times more actionable data by 2040, and half of that is going to be customer owned. And so I think we need to think through ways right now to supplement the data that is coming from utilities that we can sort of act on, and the data that's coming from different OEMs, and that more transactive data that's out there. And so I think 2222 implementation still seems to be sort of like we're swimming after it and the boat keeps moving. And so I think we need to develop those synergies now. That is like, okay, there are different owners, or not necessarily owners, but there are different ways to access different components of the data, and how do we start putting that into one spot now, so that we can really take advantage of something that would be like transactive energy or something.
I'll agree with your nautical analogy on that swimming after it. It really comes down, from my mind, the business development world. I'm trying to fill the need. If someone doesn't have a problem, it doesn't really make sense for me to speak to them. So I have to start problem oriented, and I have to say, what is it that you need this data for, and what is the use case that this is going to help you achieve? Again, because we've been speaking about it, the world of real estate, we know that someone's looking at operating expenses. We know that if you are, let's say, a large REIT or a large multinational company with sustainability objectives to achieve, you need to have this data, and you yourself might not be handling it or touching it, but you need to package it because you know it's important for the investors. So I'm always thinking about, okay, we've got this information, we want it to be real time, we want it to be here now, but how do I give it to you, how do I present it to you in a way that isn't overwhelming? Because frankly, I heard those figures from Chris about 2040, and how can anyone comprehend what an exabyte means? It's not possible. So I hope that we as an industry can continue to think about, yes, we're awash in data and it's wonderful and we need it, and GBA should keep doing all the great work it's doing, but we have to try to narrow the funnel and really make it relevant.
I appreciate the question on FERC 2222 in particular, but you asked how does it tie back to the GBA? And so I'm going to say something, you guys can make fun of me, but we've been in a room talking about energy market for a whole 2 hours and we haven't said the name Jigar Shah yet. We said the VPP liftoff report, we didn't say his name. But when you talk about the future of where energy is going, you ask him, and I agree with him, that you can't have much of what we're talking about if you don't solve the data access problem first. And so we're here today talking about a standard that is trying to solve the data access problem. So when you ask about FERC 2222, think about how cumbersome, the swimming the stuff, but you guys use the nautical theme, so I'll just talk about the boat, right? So this FERC 2222 is the boat, like how are you gonna build a boat, right? There's rules for how the market should act, but like actually how do you make the data flow? And if we get that wrong, and we don't use standards, or if we don't build it in a way that is adjusted so that the prosumer can actually just click a button and know that their data is protected, but also know they can just sign up for the service and make these guys' jobs easier, we're gonna be stuck. Doesn't matter what FERC says. And so I think that limitation is key, and I think organizations like GBA are actually hugely important to making that happen, and it's something that we need to really wake up to as an organization to be ready to actually help lead on some of that work.
I just want to mention one thing. I'm in the payments industry, and a couple of years ago we've been talking about merging data together. Government changes at the 1033. We were looking at 40 or 50 financial institutions nationwide participating in this. At the end of the second quarter, we'll have over 6,000 financial institutions. And we talk rising tide, all boats. This is going to help you and consumers manage their households, not only financially, but with energy, with telephone, everything that they do is part of this. And so if you miss any of these elements, consumers aren't going to gravitate to it. So seeing energy go up here and Green Button doing this work really helps everyone in this ecosystem. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. It's good to see it from the billing side of things, the payment side. Because ultimately, that's where the buck stops, literally and figuratively. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. Alex and Will, it was a great session, great information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to hear from Jason McGrady. Jason is the Deputy Director of the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. The Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative just did a consumer symposium yesterday. It was a full-day event with some amazing things. It's a great organization that we've been involved with since the beginning. They are an affiliate organization of ours, and we're an affiliate organization of theirs. So we get a chance to do a lot together.
So yeah, thank you all for having me today, talking about the state of the consumer. So as mentioned, we are a membership organization. We're made up of different utilities, technology partners, consumer advocates, a whole mix of different folks within the energy industry, all working to have that better conversation with today's consumers. So we just released our State of the Consumer 2025 report. We will be doing a webinar on the topic in April, talking about some of the different themes that we saw that were captured in the last 18 months worth of data that we've collected, talking directly to consumers, energy decision makers in the home about what is it that they need, what is it that they want from their utility. Some of the things that we always want to make people aware of is that utilities are coming from a place of strength. They're coming from a place as a trusted source, and consumers actually want information from their utility. So it's really nice to see that in the deluge of information and messaging that is going out, consumers are actually raising their hand and say, hey, I would actually like this stuff. This is actually something that I would benefit from. Please give me more information. And what we're seeing is that definitely skews even higher in older demographics, 55 plus. The Midwest, surprisingly, was very high to raise their hand as we dug a little bit deeper into the data. But that's not to say that it's only going to these people. You know, what it means and what is it that they're looking for from their utility is definitely, you know, giving consumers options, giving consumers the ability to feel like they have control of their situations. That could be new rate information, that could be, you know, as mentioned, you know, I just bought an EV, I'd like to get some more information around that. My HVAC is kicking up challenges, what are the options for me? So I think all the use cases that we presented earlier today are very fitting, very timely for consumers as it relates to what they would want from their utility. We also had a number of different smaller research tied to looking at information about storm alerts and you know, being proactive in terms of providing with information for emergency planning, looking at opportunities around demand response, both in summer and winter, where having that voluntary option was really welcomed by consumers. That full control was still a little hesitant, but giving me more information, making me feel more trusted that I can give this type of ownership away to the utility to better manage my home, continue to keep me in that place of comfort, and have that back and forth mutual benefit is certainly something that we continue to see within multiple pieces of our data. So again, getting tools, getting the ability to do some of the cost analysis, being able to showcase information as it relates to me, the consumer, is super beneficial, super helpful. Consumers are wanting that, they want that for sure. A little additional nugget that we saw within some of our other reports was when it came to grid modernization questions, most people, it didn't quite register what they were looking at, what they were being asked, but EV owners raised their hand in full effect. They were more than willing to align with the utility around some of these initiatives. They'd be willing to pay more on their bill as it relates to some of these grid modernization efforts because they see the value, they get the benefit. So there's more connection and opportunity with those types of consumers as you look to market and do some of these outreach channels. As mentioned, you know, in terms of those that were looking for information within the general population, you know, was skewing over. But what we found interesting with the younger demographics is that when they saw the information, when they saw those messages, it really did start to resonate. It really started to connect with them. They found the communications very interesting. They weren't expecting some of the benefits therein. So great opportunities, again, to engage with consumers across all different demographics, but utilities have to communicate. They have to send information. They have to make it relatable to consumers in today's space. You know, as we heard from the previous panel, they're not always thinking about some of these things, but giving them the right information, giving them the right times to take action through some of these demand response, through some of these VPP opportunities. You know, more and more folks are starting to raise their hand and say, yes, I am willing to participate because you informed me in such a way, you educated me in such a way that I get the value out of this. Whether that's incentivized financially or through a FOMO or through, hey, my neighbors are all doing this, so we're gonna do this together. That definitely all resonates with consumers, but you have to make sure that it makes it feel like it's their choice, that they are taking action and not being forced to do these things. So as mentioned, you know, messages are actually driving these positive perceptions from the utility to the consumers. More and more, again, as they see this information, they are resonating with it. They do find the utility, again, to be that trusted source, to be someone that's providing the valuable information in a timely manner. So more messaging is good, and the opportunity, again, to share some of this data across a number of different platforms so that they're able to get those consistent ways of engagement is super beneficial. Before joining SCCC, I've got a usability background, and so I always used to say I fight for the user, and that's a great way of getting good user experience across the board. That's just great, because if you get them to do something, you get to the site and it's not a good experience, it's lost, and it definitely takes a much harder time to get them back. So looking at a couple of smaller bits of data that we have, we released a series of smart energy snapshots. These are designed to be very timely, very topical, short 5-minute surveys around a particular area of interest. As mentioned, EVs, those are a group that are very engaged consumers once they've made that purchase, but there's still a number of folks that aren't driving EVs, that don't have interest in driving EVs. And within that group, cost is still a concern. Awareness of rebates and incentives is still relatively very low. So even though we're talking about it constantly, there's EV sessions here, there's, it's in the news all the time, consumers aren't necessarily fully getting that. It's not fully trickling down to them. So it's something where we have to continue to get those messages out, continue to use those opportunities to network and collaborate, to share the information, to share the value, because there's a lot of learning that still has to be done as it relates to this type of technology. As it relates to AI, we had a survey tied to individual consumer interest in AI, and there's certainly something where it's very fascinating to see consumers that have experience with AI are more trusting of AI versus those that have not experienced AI. And I think as AI becomes more and more commonplace for consumers, we're going to see some of that uptick. There is some concern around data privacy that does remain, but it's such where, I think everybody here in the room is aware of that and is working forward on trying to get those aspects taken care of, and again, continuing to communicate from the utilities perspective as a position of trust is certainly something that's looked upon. I don't think anybody is not taking cybersecurity to heart, but it is just obviously something that's also coming up in consumers' minds as well. Looking at some of the other more hard-to-reach demographics, we had a snapshot survey tied to Spanish language households. And this was something that we thought was really interesting, where when comparing to the general population, they're a much more engaged group that is just not necessarily getting the messages that they need. They are more in line with the utilities' goals around decarbonization, increasing renewable energy, looking at some of those opportunities they're in. They're much more aware of some of the home's energy usage, but again, they're not necessarily getting all those messages to them. So great opportunity to continue to use that. Numbers work in a lot of spaces, so this is good for all folks regardless of language. And lastly, I wanted to share our most recent Smart Energy Snapshot focused on winter DR. And again, this was where we start to see again, time and time again, consumers are very interested in doing voluntary work, but they're not necessarily fully committed to a direct control opportunity. Those numbers are increasing from what we've seen based off of similar questions and similar surveys. And more folks are raising their hand as it relates to voluntary opportunities, but that full direct control isn't quite there yet, but there is still that growth opportunity. There is more opportunity to continue to build awareness, to continue to build on that trust, to encourage folks to take part and remain engaged with these types of programs. It is such where we recognize that once you get a consumer involved in one program, they are more likely to take part in others, which is good, but getting them that first experience, getting them connected in such a way is certainly the challenge. But more and more folks are definitely interested, which is a great position to come from. So with that, I want to say again, thank you all for having us today. Thank you to Green Button Alliance. We're really appreciative of our relationship and would love to continue the conversations as it relates to all things consumers.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Anybody have any questions for Jason? I encourage you to visit the website, smartenergycc.org. Sign up to be a member of the SECC, and while you're at it, GBA as well, if you're not a member, and get involved in that. Thank you again. Appreciate it. All right, so we have a we have some things we're going to talk about here. I just want to quickly tell you about the green button directory that was mentioned earlier by Syed. This is really important because several people out there in our group here and then out there had asked about how to find these things. There was, Bob had pointed out that there was a real need for being able to find the point at which you can share your stuff on a website, because sometimes navigating these websites is very difficult. And so one of the things we put together was the directory services to do just that. So the very first thing we have for directory services is a very simple 3 different places to find information. The first is our utilities, or data custodians as we like to call them. And that's a listing of all the different utilities that wish to be a part of this directory. So you can find them there. Next, we have third-party providers of services, and they can list their wares in there as well. And then we have the vendors to those utilities. So any utility looking to find a vendor to implement a green button platform for them can indeed find that person. So first I want to show you real quick what it looks like here inside the directory. When you look over at the utilities section, you can see a bunch of different utilities that have put their information in here. I'm going to choose Enbridge Gas out of Ontario to show you their profile. So when we look at their profile, this is what you'll see for each one of the utilities, depending on how much information they provided. A little overview of the organization, some social media things, website links, details about their platforms. Is it certified? Is it not? What kinds of things is it certified for? Is it natural gas, water? Is it electricity, something else? And then also have a listing of little buttons here. Download my data, connect my data. Third-party CMD registration, so that third parties know where to go to be a part of this. And a real important one also is a listing of third parties if they have it on their own website. So let's say you're a consumer and you want to be able to share your data, or you're a third party and want to interface with that utility. You can easily do so by simply clicking on the Connect My Data button, and you're there. And you're right to that website. We'll do the navigation for you with this directory. So that'll avoid those broken links that Bob had shared with you before, and also that navigational nightmare. So that's really fun. The next thing I want to show you is a real quick look into the third-party green button services that are offered here. So all the third parties that offer some sort of a service are here. And since Logical Buildings was up here again, I'll pick on Alex and show his information here. And you can go into that and see what that looks like. Again, the overview of the organization, some social media buttons, as well as phone numbers and website links. A little bit different down here. Go all the way to the bottom right. You'll see app features. This is sort of the old Twitter, where it had a very small amount of text that you could do. That was the whole entire goal here. This is the elevator pitch of why you'd want to use their application. So we intentionally kept this small so that you had to be very concise about your app. Talk about your company all you want, but tell people what that app is so they can find it and say, yeah, that's for me, or no, that's not quite what I need. Looking just above that, you see their buttons there. You see a green button Data Solutions button, which is a link to get you right to that section in their website on green button data. Then you have a link to their Apple App Store, their Google Play Store, and any utilities for which they're onboarded, you can click directly there. Again, navigation being eliminated. So that's how we get at that. I'm going to bring Syed back up again here. He's going to close this out today and give you some thoughts on where we're headed moving forward.
Just a quick one. We're just looking at where the segments of customers, and again, we'll share this slide so you can see where we see our value for our customers, and where we talked a lot about this. Again, looking forward, we're going to have the PDF and the invoice and the bill. That's a big thing for everybody, rather than, and this will give you that cost element that we're talking about, and so looking forward, and as we look forward. As well as outage information, and there used to be I think there was an outage button at one point that Chris had talked about too. So this is where we're integrating and things like that, and looking at the open ADR as well as a key part. Just quickly, there's a lot of things we're talking about where we're going. I just wanted to just sum up a little bit and use this as a backdrop. I think Chris made some very valid points. We've been 10 years. I think the next 10 years seems like we could be escalating. Not only about data, the scope, but the reach of green button. So to me, I feel that video is really worthwhile to share with everybody. I think it's good to share with your staff, senior management, because people say, what is all this green button? I think it's very much, the message was there, that really the amount of data that's growing and the scope and where we could go, we have a very solid foundation that we can build on, and I think it's very good. And that pitch to you is hopefully we can attract more members, we can get more people, more industries interested. And again, looking at this as being a fact that I want to thank the panels for sharing their vision and what they're doing. And I'd like to end with the fact that hopefully we don't have to worry about the T word, that there's no tariff on data or information. I'm really, and I say that in jest, but I'm sort of worried a little bit also that things may get territorial, because green button is to try and break the borders and where we are and what information needs to be available. And we need to encourage more collaboration and sharing of information, and that's the key part that we're looking at. So thank you very much. I think it's been great while, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Thanks, all.